through the police body cam, Judge Carol Weimer under the microscope. We have a lot to talk about. We have a lot to talk about. I want to thank Mohammed for being on the podcast. Mohammed, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I know it's cold.
It's freezing.
It is freezing. We're in front of the Department of Justice. The FBI building is right across the street. Before we dive into everything that we want to talk about, I want to specifically thank the police officer that stands at the gate for the Department of Justice for accommodating everything that we're doing here. I want to thank their supervisor. And on that note, let's dive in. There's a lot to talk about.
I should give a recap of why we're here, who Mustafa Al-Jazari is, what's going on with his case, and what's going on in Prince William County, Virginia, Manassas, Virginia, under the failed leadership of Sheriff Glenn Hill and Amy Ashworth and the Chief of Police, Peter Newsham. So, Mustafa Al-Jazari was involved in a vehicle accident on April 5th, 2023. And Mustafa was in a tragic car accident. So he lost his family members that night. He was helicoptered to the hospital. He was the only survivor in his vehicle. He was driving a 2007 Chrysler 300 when his vehicle lost control and ended up into oncoming traffic and T-boned by a Chevy Suburban, and a large SUV. Now, why are we here? Mustafa was drug tested at the hospital. They conducted a DUI investigation. They cleared his name. He was let out that night after a little bit over 6 hours in the hospital. They checked him out and they released him. We took him home. 2 days later, Mustafa gets a phone call from a Prince William County crash investigator by the name of Robert Drum. Robert Drum talks to Mustafa over my cell phone. He calls my phone because the police department had Mustafa's phone, his vehicle.
Mohammed, you have that phone call recorded, right?
I recorded that phone call. So Mustafa talks to Investigator Drum for 30 minutes. Investigator Drum tells Mustafa that he wanted to speak to him some more. Mustafa says, "Sure, yeah, I'll speak to you, but I will bring my lawyer with me." And that night, which is 2 days later, that night, police show up at Mustafa's residence and arrest him. Okay? He's charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, and he's taken to the Prince William County Adult Detention Center in Manassas, Virginia. Now, throughout this case, this has been ongoing for almost 24 months. The entirety of this time, Mustafa has been sitting in solitary confinement at the Prince William County Jail in Manassas, Virginia. He has been sexually assaulted by jail officers. He had his religious rights violated, where officers went into his cell. They stepped over his Quran, his prayer rug. He has been deprived food, water.
Mohammed, this is a video of a CCTV inside the jail where they go in and beat.
This is a month into his incarceration, after the police department and the lawyers find out that Mustafa recorded Robert Drum's audio. That 30-minute conversation that I just told you about, the lawyers and Prince William County prosecutors find out that Mustafa recorded that conversation. And this is what took place after they find out that Mustafa had evidence that the primary investigator falsified that warrant. He falsified Mustafa's statements on that police report. The investigator claimed that Mustafa told him he was in an argument, which is not true, as well as other things. 5 specific items on that recording that Mustafa never said. And we have it on recording. The warrant says one thing. The warrant says Robert Drum alleged Mustafa stated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mustafa never made those statements. Okay? That warrant was issued based on falsified pretense, falsified information from the police department. Okay? Now, police have stated that Mustafa never attempted to avoid a vehicle accident. This is what they allege, that he never attempted to stop his vehicle. They claim that Mustafa has an abusive relationship, which is not true. Mustafa has never been charged or convicted with abuse or any type of domestic violence. Okay? I'm going to pull up the warrant, but there are multiple things that are a complete lie, absolute complete lie, which are easily verifiable, by the way. You can easily verify it if you look up Mustafa's name through the police database. Okay? Now, Mustafa had a dash camera in his car that the prosecutors wanted to hide, that the police department have tampered with. We find out today that the police department, specifically Investigator Drum, Investigator Chad Mason, took that dash camera and plugged it into their computer, which they admit on the stand in a motion to dismiss that they have violated their own department policy with regards to digital evidence. Okay? They admit on the stand that digital evidence is supposed to go to digital forensics, and they extract the information. However, Chad Mason, in an October 31st, 2024 hearing, admitted on the stand. He said, yes, I violated my department policy, and I've been doing it for over 12 years. So what? That's what he says on the stand. Okay? Now, we have a problem with that because the prosecutor in court claims that Mustafa's dash cam did not capture audio, and they allege that Mustafa was in a heated argument.
As a matter of fact, they went on the news on NBC4, and they said what on the news? They were getting a lip reader, right?
This is a year into the case where after we took the dash cam from a lawyer, from Casey Stevens, okay, and we posted it to the internet because the prosecutors and the police department never told the public that Mustafa had a dash cam. Now, you're accusing this person of driving his vehicle into oncoming traffic intentionally. That's what you're alleging. But you never tell the community that he had a dash cam that records in 4K quality, records audio, interior video, exterior video, has a G sensor, it records the speed, captures all this information. This is a high-tech camera.
No.
This camera is over $600.
Now, Mohammed, at what point the Commonwealth Attorney came out to the community and told the community there is a dash camera? I mean, for a whole year, they said they didn't talk about the dash camera. At what point?
A year and a half into the case, a year and a half into Mustafa's incarceration, is the first time we hear prosecutors say on the media that Mustafa has a dash camera. That's the first time they say it. And they don't release the entirety of the dash camera. They release a molested version of it, where they take 1 second from here, 1 second from here, and they're trying to merge these different times to make it look like something that it's not. Okay? This dash cam recorded the moment Mustafa got into his vehicle from the apartment. The moment he left the apartment. Okay, we see Mustafa cleaning his car.
Now, Mohammed, let me ask you a question. You said the prosecutor released a dash camera, a deformed version, a chopped up version, 5 seconds of the dash camera, after a year, right?
After a year and a half.
She released it to Julie Carey with NBC4, correct?
That's right.
And Julie Carey on NBC4 said the prosecutor is getting a lip reader. That this dash camera doesn't have audio, correct?
This is in April of 2024.
Now, you remember sitting down with Julie Carey in the beginning of it. When did we sit down with Julie Carey at Starbucks?
We sat down in, I believe it was late August of 2023. It was right after we fired Casey Stevens.
Now, did we not supply Julie Carey with NBC4 with the dash camera?
We did, actually. We supplied her with the entirety of the dash camera. She looked at the whole thing from the moment Mustafa left the apartment where he got into the vehicle until the car accident.
Now, how is it? This is how long into the case?
This is August 2023.
August. Now, NBC4 Julie Carey came out with the dash camera from the prosecutor, and all over the news, she's pretending that she saw the dash camera for the first time, even though I've got text communication, me and her,
With
that
Julie
I
Carey.
that I with Julie Carey, that I sent her the dash camera, but she pretends that it's for her first time getting the dash camera or seeing this dash camera.
You know, there's a reason why Donald Trump and others say that the news media is fake news. Okay, there's a reason for it. Okay, and it's completely valid. It's absolutely valid because Julie Carey, like Amar just said, Julie Carey had the dash camera in August of 2023, but in May of 2024, when prosecutor Amy Ashworth releases 5 seconds of it, she blasts it all over the internet. She's all over the internet.
And she never told the community there's a dash camera.
All over the media. We've been telling Julie Carey from day one. We're telling her that this is the dash cam. We're giving it to her. We're giving her a lot of information that Amy Ashworth was hiding at the time. Information that we were able to obtain through the stupidity of Casey Stevens. We were able to obtain this information, and we sat down with Julie Carey for almost nearly 3 hours.
So let me ask you a question. You sat down with Casey Stevens. You supplied him the dash cam. You supplied him the home videos, other information. There's a Google.
7 days into Mustafa's incarceration, I was able to log into Mustafa's Gmail account and obtain a Google Nest, which is a camera that was inside the apartment. This camera is always recording. This camera was placed there by Mustafa and Dorothy, and whenever they would leave the apartment, that's how they checked up on the kids. This camera was on 24/7. It was motion activated.
And, go ahead.
Anytime any of these kids would come up to the camera, it would automatically record. It would start recording immediately. And we gave all those files over hours and hours and hours and days of Mustafa and Dorothy interacting with the family, with the children. It gives you a glimpse into their life. It shows you how this couple was living. Okay? And we gave that to Casey Stevens. Now, this camera recorded April 5th, which is the day of the accident, April 4th, April 3rd, and days prior to that. And we gave that information to Casey Stevens to use to debunk what the prosecutor was saying.
Well, let me ask you this. Before we dive into the Google Nest videos that you supplied Casey Stevens, let's go back to Julie Carey.
How you doing?
Lance Walmart. If you ever do get a chance, tune in to our YouTube channel. It's called Not Another Boring Podcast.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your service. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Making sure you're getting public title and all that.
God bless you.
I
Thank you.
plan on being out here.
Probably maybe an hour, 2 hours.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Take care.
Thank you. You know, on a side note,
Yeah.
we want to thank these men for the tough job that they do day in and day out. We know that police have a extremely difficult job, okay? And, you know, sometimes they have to balance their decisions, okay? But ultimately, they swore an oath to the Constitution, and just like these fine men, okay, they're just checking on everybody, okay? They're making sure that everything is okay.
Every time we come on this podcast, every time we come out and exercise our First Amendment, we want to remind everybody that what these police officers have done in the Mustafa Al-Jazari case, in the other file that's coming out of Prince William County with other individuals, Tatiana David, Juan Campos, Rodney Ward, the files that we have in the other files that we're gonna start releasing. This is not a reflection of every police officer. You know, a lot of time you have blinders on when you're dealing with these situations. The majority of police are serving this community, putting their life on the line every single day. And these police officers that are falsifying police report, engaging in police misconduct, is not a reflection of every police officer in Prince William County and Manassas County. And like Muhammad said, we want to thank these officers that are here. We want to thank the police officer at the gate with the Department of Justice for accommodating what we're doing here. I mean, ultimately, what we're doing is we want those police officers held accountable. On that note, let's dive back into what we were talking about. And Mohammed, before we go into the Google Nest videos inside Mustafa apartment, I want to go back really quick and touch on the Julie Carey situation with the dash camera. Now, I remember Julie Carey came out and pretended that she never had the dash camera. It's her first time watching the dash camera. And I remember when she was on the news, she said the prosecutor has a lip reader. Well, that's interesting because at the time, the prosecutor did not have a lip reader. She got a lip reader 2 months after in court revoked Mustafa's bond on the premise that she has a lip reader. She never had a lip reader. Now, the disturbing part about the whole thing in the discovery, when you look in the discovery, you realize you realize that Officer Zymus with the police department admit in the discovery that this dash camera has audio, and they're in possession of the audio. So, what do you need a lip reader for?
The specific quote that Officer Zymus, who's in digital forensics, who took this dash cam, examined this dash cam in detail, she says the videos on this dash cam have a visible audio track. Okay, Robert Drum says that this dash cam has audio. Okay, now what's really interesting here is, I mean, to back up a little bit, we were able to obtain every body cam in Mustafa's case. Every body cam, with the exception of two.
Everything that's in the discovery.
Everything in discovery, we were able to obtain.
Every document, every body cam in the discovery.
Including internal files, okay? Every piece of evidence that the prosecutor has in the system, we have it, okay? Now, there are two pieces of body cams missing. Number one is the accident happened on April 5th at 6:36 p.m. Now, there's a sworn statement by a Metropolitan Police officer from the DC, from the District of Columbia, who happened to be there at the time of the accident. And in his statement, he says that he was the first officer on scene. He was still in uniform. He still had his body camera, and he immediately activated it. Okay? He's the one that approached the Chrysler that Mustafa was driving. Okay? He's the one that was assessing everyone in the car. Now, his body cam miraculously is not there.
Well, let's back up a little bit.
Even though Robert Drum communicates with him, they give him a evidence.com link where he can where he got permission from his police department.
In the discovery, it says that this police officer's body cam is on, and it was what? Uploaded to evidence.com. So it should be in the discovery.
Yeah, this body camera is nowhere to be found. I mean, why are we so interested in this body cam? Okay, well, because it shows you what happened on the scene initially. Because every body cam we look at, it's always 30 minutes into the accident. Now, where are the initial body cams? You don't see Dorothy, you don't see Empress in any of the body cams. Why not? Where are those videos? Okay? Mustafa's dash cam is cut prior to impact. Now,
I mean, I've never seen a dash camera that cuts off before impact unless you manually cut this body cam. This dash camera.
The prosecutor in court says this dash cam cut off prior to impact. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, you look at the interior video, no one's touching the wire, nobody's touching this camera, but miraculously this dash cam cuts off before impact. Okay? Now, Investigator Drum says that he heard Dorothy screaming. Okay, he describes Dorothy as screaming. How do you know she was screaming if you're claiming there's no
audio? No, you're talking about the body cam where he's standing.
No, this is in his written report.
Oh, in his report.
In his narrative, yeah. He says he observed the dash camera, and Dorothy was screaming. Okay. In another instance, he's talking to Casey Stevens, the corrupt attorney. Okay, and he tells him that Mustafa and Dorothy were discussing something about court. Now, how can you know this information if you don't have the audio?
Now, you have the body cam. We have the body cam. We posted that body cam where he's standing with the prosecutor, with the lawyer Casey Stevens at the time, the defense attorney, with the special independent the person that was inspecting the vehicle next to the vehicle, and he's telling him, "I heard the conversation. They were talking about court." He specifically said, "I've heard them talking about courts." You're admitting that there's an audio to the dash camera.
I mean, investigator Zymus with forensics says there's a visible audio track. Okay, there's a visible audio track. Okay, I reached out to Rexing personally as a normal citizen, okay, as a consumer. I reached out to Rexing, and I have it in writing. What they told me is, as long as the audio capability option is turned on, they can always retrieve the audio. Always. As long as you send them the original files, they're able to fix the audio issue and retrieve it. Now, we have body cams of Robert Drum, Investigator Drum, the lying investigator, talking to Rexing, and not once does he mention to Rexing that the audio is missing. Not once does he ask, how do you obtain this audio? Why is there no audio? He never says it. Rexing tells us that if the camera detects an impact, that this dash cam specifically is designed to save the recording on a normal file, a normal recording file where all the recordings are, continuous recording, and it also saves it in a locked folder, which is called an incident folder. Now, there should be 2 copies of this last minute where the accident happened. Why is there only one? Where is the locked file? Okay, where is this audio? And why was it never mentioned for over a year and a half? It was never mentioned to Mustafa or his attorneys that, number one, his dash cam audio capability was turned on, okay, and that they had a visible audio track. I mean, where is this audio?
Now, this
why
is
no mention of this? I mean, this is exculpatory evidence that was held back by the prosecutors. This is a clear violation. This is a clear Brady violation.
Now, let me ask you a question, Mohammed. You reached out to Rexon. Around what time? When did you reach out to Rexon?
I don't know. I think it was sometime in 2023.
2023. Do you remember the month?
I can pull it up.
Okay. The reason I ask is because I have a very interesting body cam where investigator Drum is reaching out to Rexon. Now, the question is, investigator Drum never, in his entire conversation with Rexon, never talked about the audio. Now, why is this not the first thing that he's talking to when he's talking to Rexon? I mean, you're talking about a dash camera that doesn't have audio, and you're not asking Rexon why is your dash camera doesn't have audio? Nowhere in the conversation, in this body cam, is he talking about audio. He's talking about the speed, where it doesn't change, it continue on 77, it doesn't change, it's not calibrated. He's talking about the GPS, he's talking about the app, he's talking about everything except the audio. I'll tell you why. Because you already have the audio.
Exactly.
You have the audio. And now what you're doing, you've chopped up this dash camera before impact. A camera does not stop before impact. You have a camera. We have a camera, a dash camera, that cuts off before impact with no audio. What I want to do, once you pull that email, what I want to do, while you pull up the email, I want to play the body cam. And let's hear what Investigator Drum is telling Rexon. What kind of conversation are they having? And for everyone out there that is in the that has a background into technical support, they'll tune in to this conversation on a different level. I want to reach out to specifically our good friend Shelly. It's interesting when she listened to the technical support from Rexon and the detail that he goes into about this dash camera. I mean, it's a different conversation when you have that background. All right. On that note, Mohammed, I'm going to play the that body cam.
The thing here.
Yeah.
So much.
itself on the receiver when you pull it up and have the GPS coordinates at the bottom. Those don't change, and then the speed limit in the bottom right-hand corner stays at 77 even when he stopped and driving, and we can't figure out why.
Okay.
Pause it right there. Pause it right there.
On the GPS,
Pause it.
there is a way in the settings.
Okay, so you just heard him ask that something about the GPS coordinates and the speed. You're talking about, I mean, this is months into
This is July
2023.
19, 2023. The accident happened in
July
April.
19th, 2020. Okay.
April 5th. This is July 19.
So months after this prosecutor in court, time and time again, accuses Mustafa of being in an argument. Okay? The first thing on the investigator's mind is, why is the GPS coordinates not accurate? Why is the speed not accurate? I mean, come on. Really, you're a crash reconstructionist. You've been with the department for 20 years. The prosecutor is specifically making an allegation that Mustafa was in a heated argument. He was in a heated argument. That Dorothy was crying. That's what they say. She was crying and he was in a heated argument. And you're asking about the speed, which you already have from the data recorder? The coordinates? What are you trying to find? Location? Oh, you can continue.
Now, what I find disturbing is we're talking about the same. This is the same investigator that you have a recording of that falsified Mustafa's statement on the police report. This investigator said, "You told me that you were arguing with your girlfriend inside the vehicle. You told me that you were angry at your girlfriend inside the vehicle." This is the same investigator. Now,
That the chief of police himself have said, Robert Drum, they've conducted an investigation.
how convenient is it for this investigator that the audio is not there? And he's not even worried about the audio. That's not the first thing he asked technical support from the dash camera company. That's not the first thing you talk about. And what's really disturbing is nowhere in this conversation does he talk about the audio.
I'm going to read this letter from the chief of police, dated February 29th, 2024. Dear Mr. Al-Jazari, the investigation of your complaint against Master Police Officer Drum has been completed. The police department takes these allegations very seriously and conducted a thorough investigation into the circumstances surrounding this incident. The investigation revealed that Master Police Officer Drum violated department policy. Therefore, appropriate corrective action has been taken. Thank you for bringing your concern to my attention. Sincerely, Peter Newsham, Chief of Police, Office of Professional Standard. Now, this complaint was in reference to a complaint that Amar filed, and what Amar specifically stated to the police department in his complaint. He says, 2 days after my brother woke up from a coma and was released from the hospital, Investigator Drum called my brother Mustafa Al-Jazari on the phone. My brother Muhammad Al-Jazari recorded the conversation. Investigator Drum falsified my brother Mustafa's police report. I would like to submit the audio of the conversation to your department. Please listen to the audio and read Investigator Drum police report, and you will see that the report is falsified. This is a very, very specific complaint. Very specific.
Now, what's disturbing?
Alleging that Robert Drum falsified Mustafa's statement based on that audio. And that was the chief of police's response. That the officer, Robert Drum, the investigator, the primary investigator, had violated department policy, and that appropriate corrective action has been taken. The only action that was taken after this letter was issued was Mustafa was assaulted 3 more times inside the jail. Okay? You know, I talk to lawyers all the time about Mustafa's case. And when I tell them what happened to him inside the jail, they always ask me why. Why do you think the jail officers are doing that to your brother?
Well, you know, I think the best person to ask is the lawyer that was filing a lawsuit for Mustafa before the vehicle accident in his lawsuit against the police for violating his rights. Mustafa had a over $500,000 lawsuit against the police from 2018 all the way to the day of the accident.
So prior to the accident, Mustafa was suing the police for malicious prosecution, for entering his home without a warrant, for falsely arresting him, falsely charging him, and then dismissing those charges. And now he was suing the Stafford County Sheriff's Office for violating his rights. And this lawsuit was ongoing, and the lawsuit was winning. I mean, he clearly had a right. His rights were clearly violated. And there was a settlement that was about to take place. And when this car accident happened, the lawsuit was still active for another week before the lawyer withdrew from it.
You know, Muhammad, it's one thing when I say it, it's one thing when you say it. What's happening here? Why is Mustafa police report falsified? Why is he getting beaten up, abused in the jail? It's another thing when his own lawyer that was filing that lawsuit tell you what's happening here. I'm going to play the phone portion of the phone call conversation.
The investigator that wrote the report, he lied on the report. We reported that conversation. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I mean, this is clearly retaliation after retaliation after retaliation. Okay, they arrest Mustafa based on falsified reports. We give the police department evidence, hoping that they're going to do the right thing, thinking that, you know, the higher ups are going to follow the law. They're going to follow the rules. They're going to hold tyrants like Robert Drum, Chad Mason, Casey Fines, these low-level officers. They're going to hold them accountable. That's what we're hoping for. But to have internal affairs take a complaint and try to bury it, and try to take evidence, try to act like they can't hear the audio.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. When you open the discovery, when you falsify a police report and you cache the falsification, the police department, the police officer has to put a supplement report. Muhammad, the supplement report is they couldn't hear the audio, even though we were inside the building with internal affairs, with First Sergeant Sean Shelton. We have a recording where he's sitting across the table, listening to the audio and highlighting the falsified statement as we were going over it.
You know, the conversation is very clear. Judge Weimer himself heard it in court.
Exactly.
So, how can Judge Weimer understand the conversation? How can internal affairs understand the conversation being played on a recording? But Robert Drum seems to always have a problem hearing what's being said on this recording.
Conveniently, it's the same investigator that's on this body cam right now talking to Rexon after you reached out to Rexon. I mean, they're listening to our jail conversation, and the minute that you talk about Rexon, reaching out to Rexon, apparently this investigator reached out to Rexon. It's a small office out of New Jersey, and he's muddying up the water, telling them he's guilty, he did this, he did that. I'm a police officer, so you should take my word for it. I mean, once you listen to the body cam, it's so disturbing. Let's continue listening to it.
Okay.
Yep.
Increase or decrease the speed. But if the coordinates don't change at all, that could just be something with the firmware on the camera. I'm not sure, I'm not sure if his has been, updated to a newer version or anything like that. That could just be an issue with the firmware. Maybe it just hasn't been updated.
This is the investigator talking to Rexon out of New Jersey, the dash cam company, tech support.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coordinates whatever it's set to, basically, in the settings, which can be adjusted possibly with the speed adjustment.
Because the waiting time looks like it's
It's all good.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. You say like a firmware issue. They could also try, playing the video on the updated version of the GPS player, maybe to see if
I'm gonna pause it right there. Did you hear what you just told him? The other question. So you're telling me that you've had previous conversations with Rexon. Why is it not on body cam? Where's the body cam to those conversations?
Exactly. What other conversation? Why are you recording this portion talking about GPS, the date, and the speed, which are irrelevant at this point? They're irrelevant. Okay? And you're not talking about audio. You're not talking about why the video cuts off.
The question is, why when you open the discovery, why is it that in the discovery you don't even talk about you talking to Rexon? Your conversation with Rexon is nowhere in the discovery. I mean, did you see it?
No.
Nowhere in the discovery that you see that Robert Drum reached out to Rexon. And the other question that I have is, how the hell did you take this dash camera out of evidence without notating in evidence that you took this dash camera out? You've got the SD card sitting on your table, and I mean, so you're telling me
The
that
real
you're just
question is, why is this dash cam, why is this SD card sitting on this investigator's desk when it should really be
In evidence.
sitting in evidence
Forensic.
or sitting at digital forensics? I mean, you just took Officer Investigator Zymus' job. Investigator Zymus does that for a living. She's sitting in digital forensics. Her job is, when she obtains digital evidence, based on what we heard in court, she says she makes a copy of the original, and then she starts to manipulate or work with the copy version so that the original files are never manipulated, so that the original files are preserved. That's what you call preservation of evidence. Okay? This is what she claimed. Okay? That she makes a copy of it and then begins playing or editing the files that she copied. The image, not the original, never the original. But here you have a body cam of Robert Drum and also Investigator Mason, who took the stand on October 31st, 2024, and said, yes, I took the original SD card and plugged it into my laptop. Prior to anybody making a copy of this file, before anybody looked at it from digital forensics, I mean, you're sitting there talking about these files are corrupt, the video cut off, there's no audio. I mean, you're sitting there messing around with the original files. You have a police department policy when it comes to digital evidence, okay? And now you play with the evidence, you mess around with it, and then you say, oh, well, I mean, files are corrupt.
Well, what did Rexon tell you in your communication with Rexon? What did they tell you?
In my communication with Rexon, they specifically stated that as long as you have the original files, we can always retrieve the audio. If the files are corrupt, if the firmware, there's issues with the software or firmware, they can always bring back the audio as long as, one thing, as long as the audio capability is turned on, they can always bring back the
Exactly.
audio files.
And what did Officer Zymus say in the discovery?
She specifically said that the audio capability on Mustafa's dash cam was turned on.
And she can clearly see an audio track file in there.
And she can see a visible audio track. So why is it easy for us to simply email Rexon tech support, okay, and ask them, hey, how does this camera work? Can you retrieve the audio? And the simple answer is yes, send us the files, even through email, send us the files, and we'll send them back to you with the audio. You're telling me an entire police department, Prince William County, with all these investigators with unlimited resources, can't retrieve audio files? They can't mail these files to Rexon? They can't do what I did and email Rexon directly?
Because it's convenient for this Commonwealth attorney and this investigator not to have an audio. So they can say, it looks like they were arguing. You told me you were arguing, even though you falsified the statements. And
I mean, one of the witnesses on the scene, actually two of them, stated that there was extremely loud music when he approached the car accident. The music was so loud, he said you could hardly hear anybody. You can hardly hear anything.
you're talking about the off-duty paramedic?
No,
No,
this is
which one?
one of the witnesses.
Yeah.
One of the witnesses. He said there was a large speaker playing really loud music, and you can't really hear anything because the music was playing so loud, and the
Yeah.
speaker was Mustafa's car. Okay? So how can you say that they were arguing if the music was playing loud? You can clearly see in the dash cam prior to the car accident that this LED light was spinning on the speaker, indicating that music was playing.
He has a JBL speaker, and the LED, the faster it goes, the louder the music is. And you can clearly see through that dash camera that the music is loud. You had the windows down, the music's loud. How could you be arguing if you can't even hear yours? I mean, you watch that dash camera. I don't see an argument.
Exactly. There's no argument. There's clearly no. I mean, we can go into the dash cam video in detail. Okay, we can dissect it and look at all the details in this dash cam. When he left the apartment, when he's cleaning Dorothy's seat, when he was wiping his car at the apartment complex, when he's spraying perfume inside the car, air freshener. Okay, I mean, we can go into detail.
At the 7-Eleven, 3 minutes before the vehicle accident, is using a coupon to save $2 off a pack of cigarette.
Who's gonna clean their car? Okay, who's gonna spray air freshener in their car? Who's gonna fill up gas? Who's gonna try to save $1 on a pack of cigarettes? Okay, who's gonna do all that? Who cares about their car? Okay, only to crash it into oncoming traffic with him being the driver. Who does that? I mean, make it make sense. Make it make sense. I'll say this. Initially, we thought that Robert Drum had only falsified the 30-minute conversation, but looking through the body cams, it is so disturbing. The information that the stuff that you see on these body cams are extremely disturbing. Okay, extremely disturbing. I mean, now we know why Amy Ashworth and the police department are so terrified. They're terrified of anybody seeing these body cameras. Anybody. They're scared that these body cams are going to get in the hands of anybody, and they're going to release them out to the community, and the community is going to watch how this police department not only violates policy. I mean, they're not only a gang. They not only terrorize victims, okay, but they lie, they cheat, they tamper with witnesses, they tamper with evidence. Remember, this is a police department, okay? That's who you call when you're in trouble, okay? When you're alone and someone's coming after you, you dial 911. I mean, it's terrifying. It's terrifying that when you dial 911, what's his name? Casey Fines shows up.
Casey Fines.
Chad Mason shows up. Robert Drum. These are the people that you entrust to safeguard this community. Liars and cheaters, manipulators, who tamper with evidence, who tamper with witnesses, who abuse children. I mean, again, we thought that Robert Drum had only falsified Mustafa's statements on that 30-minute recording, but it is much, much worse. It's much deeper than you would ever think.
And you're specifically talking about when this made it to the news, Julie Carey said that they found out that the police officer falsified the police report. They send a letter that they admit that the police report is falsified. Commonwealth's Amy Ashworth comes out and says she admits that her investigator falsified the police report. She issues out a statement. We were aware of the officer falsified police report.
Of the officer's mistakes.
That's
what she says.
On the police report. And then she says, she doubles down and she said, we have other evidence that we're basing our charges on. Now we find out that the other charges that she has in this case is that her police officers lied to the kids, weaponized the kids against Mustafa, and that's her evidence. What does that mean?
These are Dorothy's 3 other children that were still at the apartment, and detectives, according to the kids themselves, they say that, Javen says, detectives told me that Mustafa crashed his car, killed my mom, left my sister to bleed to death, and fled the scene. This is what the detectives are telling these children.
You're talking about
who just lost their mother.
You're talking about a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old.
I mean, these kids, their mother was everything to them. Okay? Mustafa was taking care of these kids. And the police detectives are gonna sit there, tell these kids that Mustafa crashed the car, killed your mom and sister, and fled the scene. When we see on body cam, Mustafa was in a coma. He was helicoptered to the hospital, and he wasn't released from the hospital until Chad Mason signed off on his release. After they conducted a DUI investigation, after they interrogated him, after putting him through hell,
I mean-
telling him that Dorothy was okay for multiple hours, only to turn around and say, "Hey, your girlfriend? Yeah, she's dead. She's been dead." And then Chad Mason sits there and looks at Mustafa like this. I mean, is this how you're? Is this how a police officer tells someone?
Mind you, Mustafa is injected by the paramedic with 50 mcg of fentanyl. 50 mcg of fentanyl will knock you out for 9 hours.
You know,
And you have an investigator that's interrogating you,
look,
toying with you.
forget all that. You're telling me that the police, Chad Mason, Robert Drum, who's a crash investigator, 20 years into the force, 20 years. Is this how you tell people you just lost your wife, you just lost your girlfriend, you just lost your family in a tragic car accident? That's how you tell them? You allow them to be injected with drugs, and then you interrogate them, tell them they're still alive, only to turn around after 3 hours and tell them, no, they're dead.
Well,
This is how you tell people your family died? That's it?
You know, when you watch that body cam, you can clearly see what this investigator is doing to Mustafa. He wants, for 3-4 hours, he's telling Mustafa, your family is good, you are taking care of them, they're okay. And then 4 hours later, he comes in with his body cam, he's recording, and he wants to solicit a specific reaction, knowing that Mustafa is on 50 mcg of fentanyl. He wants to solicit a specific reaction. He knows Mustafa is out of it. He wants to tell him, your family is dead, and he knows Mustafa is out of it, only to record him being out of it, and he wants to go back to the prosecutor. Prosecutor, I have Mustafa, who did not care about
Did not
his
have a
family.
reaction.
Did not have a reaction. Didn't
we
care
told
about his
them
family.
that they didn't make
This monster did not care about his family. And then what happened? When he sees that Mustafa is crying, he's asking for his family, he's broken. What did he do? They seal off that body cam, and he falsified the situation. He said Mustafa did not have a reaction. He falsified the police report.
You know, I'll tell you this. When I was watching those body cams at the hospital, you know, I mean, one thing that really, really struck me was why were they kept muting, unmuting, muting, unmuting. I mean, it was two officers at the hospital. It was Officer Surdam, Matthew Surdam, and Chad Mason. Okay? These two were at the hospital. They interrogated Mustafa. They lied to him. Mustafa was asking about Dorothy. Multiple times he was asking about Empress. He was even asking about the other driver. Okay? And mind you, he was injected with fentanyl prior to arriving to the hospital. At the ambulance. He was injected with fentanyl, and then they decided to put him on a helicopter and bring him to the hospital. Now, I kept wondering, why do they keep muting their body cam? I mean, every time you see an officer, one of these two officers, interact with Mustafa, it's usually just body language, and then they think about it, they consider it, and then they turn on their audio. It's like they're acting for the camera, okay? But then I see a body cam where on the scene, before Mustafa gets to the hospital, there's a specific body cam where Chad Mason is telling Officer Matthew Surdam on how to obtain Mustafa's blood. Okay? He's trying to trick him into getting his blood. And he's telling him the key here is this and that. And then in that statement he says, what does he say specifically?
Make sure your camera is off for all of it. On that note, let me play the camera really quick.
I mean, this is a very disturbing sentence to hear out of Chad Mason. Make sure your camera is off. When do you see a police officer or an investigator tell another officer, tell a fellow officer, make sure your body cam is off for that?
For all of it.
For all of it. Make sure your body cam is off for all of it.
Well, let's play the body cam.
Why would you want to turn off your body cam? I mean,
They want to control the narrative.
we're here in the name of transparency, okay? We're here in the name of the public pays for these body cams so that we can hold officers accountable, okay? So that we have transparency, so that these issues do not arise between the community and the police. He said that. No, I didn't. I didn't say this. I did this. That's why you wear a body cam, okay? It's for transparency, and the public pays for it. Now, for you to tell a fellow officer to make sure your body cam is not rolling for all of it.
Make sure your body cam is off for all of it. This is the same investigator that got on the stand and lied about Mustafa on the stand. This is the same investigator that played with the SD card.
And this was at 7:09 p.m. Imagine the accident happened at 6:36. At 7:09, prior to Mustafa going to the hospital, prior to him being airlifted, investigator Chad Mason is telling Officer Surdam not to have his body cam on. I mean, you think about it. You would think they haven't examined the roads. They haven't found out who's at fault. They haven't looked at the dash camera. They haven't seen anything. They haven't interviewed the children. They haven't interviewed any witnesses. They haven't even scanned the road. They haven't recreated the accident scene. They haven't looked at anything. Yet here you have Chad Mason already condemning Mustafa guilty. They're already plotting this whole thing against Mustafa. And he hasn't even been airlifted.
Right before it, you have Casey Fine gets on the scene, tell investigator Drum, knowing him, I've had prior interaction with him. He wasn't driving. He was out of it. What's interesting is none of this
It says knowing him,
it
be drug related.
It must be drug related. And he starts this chain reaction that this investigator turns at one point. He's like, whatever the fuck that guy goes, I want you to follow him. About Mustafa.
And by the way, we've pulled Mustafa's not only criminal background, we've pulled up incident reports. There are no incident where Mustafa was out of it. Mustafa has never been accused or charged or even thought of to have drugs. I mean, Mustafa takes prescribed medication for ADHD.
Adderall.
Everybody knows what Adderall is, okay?
And he's prescribed. The investigator on the scenes finds his prescription.
But you have investigator Robert Drum, who's holding the bottle in his hands. And he's telling other officers Mustafa's on methamphetamine. He's on meth. He's methed out. Okay, he's drugged out. He overdosed. He's methed out. I mean,
What's really disturbing
to compare methamphetamine. I mean, when you walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, he's a meth head," okay, you're thinking somebody that does illegal drugs. You're thinking someone that is like a crackhead or something, okay? But someone that has prescribed medication for ADHD, you're gonna call them a meth head? You're gonna call them methed out? Okay, this is prescribed medication. You have the prescription in your hands.
So they
with
paint
Mustafa's name on it.
Yep.
And you're gonna tell all these other officers that he had meth on him. He had meth.
He even falsified the off-duty paramedic that's on the scene. The off-duty paramedic tells the investigator Robert Drum that Mustafa has a concussion. He believes that he's in 2021 and Obama is the president. This investigator takes what this off-duty paramedic just told him, turns to another officer, and he tells him, even the paramedic says he's methed out. He's on drugs.
I mean, you know.
He said the off-duty paramedic thinks he's on drugs. What do you mean? What are you talking about here?
We have to call bullshit when it's bullshit. Okay, we can clearly see that these officers, for whatever reason, whether because he sued them in 2018, because they had it out for him, okay, these officers clearly, Casey Fines admits on the stand, on the scene, he admits that he was able to obtain Mustafa's name, Dorothy's name, and the other children from patrol the other day.
Well, it's in the body cam.
Okay.
Within minutes of getting on the scene, they already identified Mustafa.
That patrol was following him around. Why is patrol following him around? I mean, what are you following a citizen for? This is not a police state, okay? But you have Casey Fines putting this narrative out that he's a druggie. Okay, you tested him for drugs at the hospital, and he was negative, and you released him to his family. But then you come back and you decide to falsify.
So no drugs, no alcohol, and then in return, when they find out that his blood is clean, what do? They falsify his statements.
They falsified his statements.
And that's how they got the warrant. That's how they got the arrest warrant.
I mean, we can look at the warrants. Okay, we can look at the warrants. And we can see exactly, I mean, every...
Well, before you go in there, I want to play that body cam with investigator Chad Mason,
go ahead.
who says, make sure your camera is off for all of it.
Thanks, sir. So, beautiful.
This is investigator Chad Mason.
He's going to be 100% consent. Hey, under arrest, when mentioned about no drugs and like that, just
It's the mission chemical call. It's the mission chemical call.
No, it's okay. Make sure your camera is off for all of it. And he's telling, this is investigator Chad Mason, telling Officer Matthew Sardam. He's telling Officer Matthew Sardam, make sure your camera is off for all of it. Let's go back and watch the body cam with investigator Robert Drum talking to Rexon.
Yes. Correct. So with these cameras, they have a built-in G sensor. So what typically happens?
They have a built-in GPS sensor. So this dash camera, I mean, they're sitting here confused and they don't know how many times the vehicle turned, who struck who, and what happened. I mean, this dash camera has a built-in GPS sensor where it tells you exactly how many times the vehicle turned, where was the vehicle. I mean, at the scene, investigator Robert Drum says the only way this vehicle accident would happen is if Mustafa made it through and passed every vehicle, made it all the way to the other sides, cleared all the vehicles, and the SUV turned into him. That's the only way this accident would make sense. And that's consistent with the pictures of the vehicle and the impact from the vehicle,
As well as the data recorder.
as well as the data recorder inside the vehicle. Mustafa, according to those investigators, did everything he can to avoid a vehicle accident. Now, what I find really interesting is on the body cam, they say all these are Mustafa skid marks. One of the officers asked Drum, did you have skid marks from Mustafa before he entered into oncoming traffic? Investigator Drum says, nope, there are no skid marks. That's interesting because in the discovery, I find pictures that investigator Drum took with his camera Mustafa skid marks before his vehicle entered oncoming traffic, lost control and entered into oncoming traffic. The body cams from those investigators, from those police officers that are walking through the scene, you clearly see Mustafa's skid mark. But investigator Chad Mason gets on the scene and says there are no skid marks. That's interesting. So you seal off the body cam, you seal off the discovery, and in the discovery, when we open the discovery, we find what you're hiding.
If the vibration, if it detects the impact of hovering or vibration, those videos usually get locked into an emergency folder so that they don't get overwritten when the camera records. Because, it'll overwrite whatever footage is there. So sometimes those videos get locked and saved into a separate folder. If not, if the video is there, it probably maybe has a different date or something. Or if it's like a corrupted file that's on there, that could be repaired as well.
Did you hear what he just said? He said this dash camera is so sophisticated that in a situation of an accident, when there is vibration, the file is going to be saved. The video file is going to be saved into a separate file. And even if this file is corrupt, send it to us. We can recover it for you. He's talking about the portion of the dash camera of the impact. I mean, this dash camera, when you open the discovery, you find that you have 8.3 seconds before the camera cuts off. This dash camera records in 1 minute increments. And before the camera cuts off, you have 8.3. And what's disturbing about this dash camera is the camera that's facing inward is 8.0. The camera that's facing outward is 8.3. There are missing frames to this dash camera. I mean, this proved that this investigator cut the dash camera. And people would ask, why would he cut the dash camera? I mean, they're talking about Mustafa's reaction. He did not have, he had some reaction. That's interesting that you cut the frames to his reaction. Mustafa's jaw is open. Mustafa's tongue is sticking out inside his jaw. He's reacting to the vehicle accident. But what did the police department do? They cut the dash camera facing inward at 8.3, 8.0, and the camera facing outward is at 8.3. There is no way that you have this camera would sit on two different frames. This shows that this camera is manually cut. And what did technical support say from Rexon? He says, in case of an accident, there's vibrations that will save that clip of the impact
In a separate file.
in a separate file into the SD cards.
So now you have two copies of it.
Exactly.
You have one copy in the original main folder, and then you have a copy in an incident folder. Where are those videos?
Where are those videos? So you're telling me that you have a video of the incident and you're concealing it? You're
No.
hiding it?
You know,
Well, it's on the SD card. Is this? They're not gonna. They wanted to rush Mustafa into trial in December without the exonerating evidence, without the SD card, the audio, the video, the home videos. I mean, prosecutor Sarah Samuel, we're telling the lawyer at the time, we're telling it, how could you move into
Things.
trial? All we want is evidence on the record.
Actually, four things that we wanted on the record.
Yeah.
The home videos that Amy Ashworth refuses to acknowledge. These are home I mean, clearly. The videos are from Google Nest. Okay? She can subpoena Google Nest themselves and verify that the videos are from Google Nest. You can clearly see Mustafa, Dorothy talking about...
Well, the way you authenticated the video, the way you authenticate the video in court is you put Mustafa on the stand. Mustafa, is this you in the video? I mean,
in basic terminology, you can look at the video. You can clearly see that the date is April 5th. They're leaving to go to the cemetery. You can see what they're wearing. You can see the pink flower, the solar flower that they were carrying. Okay, Dorothy says she wants to go to the cemetery. I mean, you can clearly see these videos are from that date.
Muhammad, Commonwealth Amy Ashworth is so concerned. There's a case that's coming out of Prince William County with Latoya Crabb, and she's pressing hard on this girl about her Google about her ring camera. There's ring camera in her ring footage, and she's going hard on this girl, obtaining the ring camera videos. Well, in Mustafa's case, you're running away from his Google Nest video. I mean,
You're not only running away from his Google Nest, you're running away from the crash reconstructionist that the police and prosecutors refused to let him inspect the car. You know, you read the police reports.
He has a judge order. He has a judge order to inspect the vehicle.
You look at every report, every police report, they say that this crash reconstructionist that Mustafa hired, Casey Stevens hired, that we paid for, every report says that he completed his job, he was done with the inspection. That's not true. You look at the body cam, you can clearly see that he said he wanted to inspect the brakes. He wanted to inspect the vehicle deeper, but they would not allow him. Even though there's a judge order that clearly says this company is entitled to inspect the evidence. And once again, if you are accused of a crime, you have a right to inspect the evidence in your case. That's your right. That's due process.
You're talking about the same police officer's mechanic that inspected the vehicle and found brake failure. He found brake failure.
You know,
And transmission mechanical failure.
you know, and looking at that video, that body cam of the inspection, you see Robert Drum, you know, trying to be so nice to this independent expert that's coming in. He's trying to be so nice to him. He's trying to get all close and fuzzy. Okay? And his main objective is to tell this guy, look, man, you know, whatever you're doing, it's not worth it. This guy killed a woman and her daughter. Okay? And he's sitting there describing the dash cam, lying about what's in this dash cam. Okay? It's not your job, Robert Drum. It's not your job to try to convince an independent expert who we hired to come in and give an unbiased opinion of this vehicle, to examine this vehicle and give a professional opinion of what happened to this vehicle, what's going on with this vehicle. We hired this person because you did a horrible job. So now we have to get an outside source, an unbiased opinion. We paid $5,000 for it, $5,000. We paid to this company to come in and give a professional report on what happened to this vehicle. And here you have Robert Drum sitting there trying to tell this guy, look, man, the dash cam shows she was crying and he just drove into oncoming traffic. What a liar.
What a liar,
Okay.
because the dash camera clearly showed that Mustafa never turned the wheel.
Then again,
He
it's-
ends up in oncoming traffic.
It's not his job or his place. And if Mustafa had a proper defense, a real lawyer, Casey Stevens was standing right there. Casey Stevens should have clearly stopped that conversation. He should have said, this is an inappropriate conversation, okay? I hired this company to come out and do a professional job, and you're interfering with it. Casey Stevens should have stopped it right there. But of course, Casey Stevens not going to do it. Why? Because Casey Stevens was driving drunk at some point in time in 2015, and guess who pulled him over? Robert Drum. Casey Stevens.
The same investigator that falsified the police report?
Was drunk. Casey Stevens was drunk. Crashed his car, fled the scene, okay, and was pulled over by none other than Robert Drum. So, of course, he got a break on that case. You think he's going to stop Robert Drum from manipulating this expert witness that we hired? Of course not.
Now, I remember you reached out to that crash investigator company. They wouldn't give you the report because they said that you didn't hire us. The defense attorney hired us, blah, blah, blah. But he told you something really specific and really disturbing.
Well, at the time when we had Casey Stevens.
What did he tell you? He told you that.
I'll get to it. But Casey Stevens, when we asked him about what's going on with our independent expert that we hired, didn't this guy come out, examine the car? Where's his report? And he tells us it takes about 30 days. You know, he kept telling us it takes time. They got to crunch up the data. They got to put it into software. They have to recreate this accident to see how it happened. And he was telling us that, you know, with the data that we have, we can actually see how fast Mustafa's vehicle was driving. We can see if the car next to him sped up. Okay? We can see exactly what happened, what actions each car took based on the data that we have. And they're crunching the numbers, but they're going to give us a professional, completed report. It just takes time. You know, it takes about 30 days. I have a recording of it. Okay? He said it takes about 30 days. Now, fast forward, after firing Casey Stevens, we call up this company, and I talk to the guy that actually did the inspection. And he tells me that Casey Stevens, from the beginning, told him not to write a written report, to give him his findings orally, and that was the end of it. And I'm thinking, like, why would Casey Stevens, why would he lie to us? I mean, we're sitting there, we're waiting on, we're delaying Mustafa's bond in 2023. We keep delaying it because we're waiting on this professional, independent expert report. And then we find out that this report was never coming.
So
This
you're telling me
report
your
never
own
existed?
defense attorney, who had an inappropriate relationship with the investigator that falsified the police report, is telling the crash investigator that we paid $5,000 to not to write the report.
Not to write a report.
Interesting.
What are they so afraid of? What are they so afraid of this car being examined? What are they so afraid of this dash cam being examined? Okay? What are they so afraid of these body cams being released? What are they so afraid of? I mean, we know now what they were so afraid of, because they've lied every step of the way. They've mishandled evidence. They've tampered with witnesses. I mean, you know, talk about witnesses. A lady on the scene. A lady comes up to Officer Matthew Surdam, okay, and tells him that, she says, I was in front of the Chrysler.
Thanks, sir.
She says, I was in front of the Chrysler, and I heard tire skids prior to the accident. I heard the tire skids from the Chrysler. Okay? Now, I'll read you.
I'm going to play that body cam really quick. Just a portion of it. Where she says, I heard the brake mark. The
police have manipulated this witness testimony. Okay? Why is the witness saying one thing on body cam, and then in her written statement, it's completely different?
Well, you know who took her statement.
Matthew Serdam.
Matthew Serdam, the same one that make sure you get body cams are turned off for all of it.
Make sure your body cam is turned off for all of it. The same officer at the hospital who Mustafa repeatedly asked him about Dorothy's well-being, and he never documented it in any of his reports. Never put in his reports that Mustafa repeatedly asked about Dorothy, repeatedly asked about Empress's well-being, repeatedly asked about the other driver. I mean, they want to make Mustafa look like a horrible monster, and the only way to do it is to manipulate witnesses, tamper with evidence, and put a protective seal on all of this information.
He didn't actually see it. If he was driving right behind him.
This is what she says. I'm not gonna play a portion, not the whole thing. You want me to play the whole thing?
No,
Just
just
a
that part. So this is a witness on the scene. She says that she was right in front of Mustafa's car.
Hi. Did one of you guys see the crash?
He didn't actually see it. If he was driving right behind us.
The Charger? The
We
Chrysler?
heard it and turned around, and I was the only one who could get on with 911. So
What happened? Like, did you see
he
him?
was coming this way. We heard brakes skid. And
We heard brakes kids. Nowhere in that statement does it say that she is telling a police officer that she heard brakes kid. Now, what's disturbing when you watch Officer Matthew Serdam's body cam, you can clearly, when he's walking through the scene and he gets to Mustafa's vehicle, the SUV, and he gets to the other side of the street where the vehicle was coming from, you can clearly see Mustafa's brake marks skid marks from before the vehicle loses control and enters into the other side. They said there are no skid marks,
That's what they said.
but the skid marks is right there. And by the way, there's another picture in the discovery that investigator Robert Drum, the
took
same
with
one,
his Nikon camera.
took with his camera. But they sealed off everything, so you would have never found that out.
I mean, clearly there are skid marks from Mustafa's travel path that weren't there. You can clearly identify that from the dash cam. You can see in the dash cam that those skid marks were not there, and then they're present after the accident. Okay? Now, this is what the warrant says. Okay? Before I get into the warrant, I just want to say that the dash cam clearly shows Mustafa slammed on the brake
Yeah, the baby shifts forward. 5-year-old Empress
Right.
shifts all the way forward.
prior to getting to the light. At the light, Mustafa slams the
And there's a
brake.
skid mark right there.
The child seat shifts forward. Everything in the vehicle shifts forward prior to the accident. I mean, what is that an indication of? It's an indication of braking. Yet here the warrant says, this is what the warrant states specifically. Okay? The accused and the victim were in a relationship and in a domestic argument while driving northbound. That's a clear lie. There was no argument. Matter of fact, they were sharing a cigarette. Who argues and shares a cigarette? I mean, let's be logical here. How do you argue with somebody and share a cigarette? How do you do that? And listen to music. How do you do that? How is that possible? They were banking on the fact that they were going to hide this dash camera, they're going to hide all these body cams, and they're going to tell you, they're going to clearly lie on this warrant. And they're going to say, he was in an argument. What's your evidence? Don't worry about it. Take our word for it. We have witness statements. Witness statements that they've manipulated. Witnesses that they've tampered with. Okay? I mean, you just heard the lady say, I heard brake skid. Okay? You just heard Amar say there's photos of the scene where there are skid marks from Mustafa's vehicle. Okay? Now here they say that Mustafa was in an argument, in a domestic argument. Okay? The accused intentionally drove into oncoming traffic of southbound Dumfries Road. Both vehicles rotated within the roadway and came to rest within the southbound lanes of Dumfries Road. Okay? Now, the investigation revealed a dash cam showing the victim crying and the male arguing before subsequently changing lanes to cross over into oncoming traffic. That's a clear lie. Dorothy was not crying. She was not crying. It's clear. You can look at the video. Okay? Now, an interview with one of the
As a matter of
Fontaine-
fact, she was giving him directions.
She was giving him directions. They were sharing a cigarette. How is that an argument? How is that crying? Okay, an interview with one of the Fontaine children yielded information of the accused previously driving the vehicle into oncoming traffic to scare and get the victims and her children to comply with the accused.
So Investigator Romero sits down with the kids, tell them, and how do we find out? We found out, by the way, in a forensic interview, the kids are talking about what happened to them. They said that we trusted Mustafa, one of the kids, one of Dorothy's kids. He's
Javen.
Javen. He's 14 years old. He's 14 years old. He says, I trusted Mustafa. Mom told me to trust, always told me to trust Mustafa. But after what the investigator told me, I don't trust Mustafa. He tells him, he says, the investigator told me that Mustafa ran away from the scene, did this on purpose, ran away from the scene, left my 5-year-old baby sister in the car. And if he hadn't ran away, they could have saved her. Now, this is, mind you, the investigator is telling a 14-year-old child that just lost his mom, that clearly he's telling the officer that I trusted Mustafa. Mom always told me to trust Mustafa. The investigator is lying to this 14-year-old that just lost his mom.
You want to talk
Even though you know,
witnesses.
tamper with witnesses.
This
I mean,
is child
on,
abuse.
on body cam, you see Mustafa's being helicoptered to the hospital. Mustafa's in a coma. I mean, but the police are lying to kids. You're tampering with.
By the
This
way,
is child abuse. This is child abuse.
This is the same kid that's on the Google Nest giving him a hug before he leaves.
See, the disturbing part
The same
about all
kid
of
that
it.
he's playing around with, joking around with, okay, telling him about this girl he likes before he left the apartment. And we have the Google Nest.
We have the Google Nest inside the apartment that clearly show. You don't have to take my word for it. I mean, this would be a different situation if it was my word against. Again, and I'm sitting here telling you I love my brother. My brother would never do this. I have the Google Nest video inside the apartment. You don't have to take my word for it to see that this was a beautiful relationship. You can look at the Google Nest and you see how the kids interacted with Mustafa.
And they were begging to go with him at times. The day before, they're begging to go with him. And Dorothy says, no, we're not taking the kids. We're not going to drive around all day with the kids all day. That's not what people do. That's exactly what she says. Okay, the kids are saying, come on, let me go with you. But here the police are trying to act like these kids are scared to get in. They're on video begging to go with them. And Dorothy says, no, we're not taking the kids. Okay? Now, the next statement in this warrant is EDR.
Well, before you go into that statement, what's interesting is in Mustafa's SD card, in the dash camera, the police department talk about Mustafa door dashing with Dorothy. Now, the police department specifically only subpoenaed April 5th. On the dash camera, on the SD card, this is a very sophisticated dash camera. It records days on days. And on this dash camera, in the SD card, you can see that Mustafa is, from what they're talking about, they're saying that Mustafa is door dashing with Dorothy, is driving in his vehicle, door dashing with Dorothy. You're telling me that you're going to weaponize those kids against Mustafa and
Why not pull the video?
Why not pull the videos in the SD cards?
Why not pull the
I mean,
videos
you
on
want to
the SD
know
card?
exactly. You want to know if Mustafa is a reckless driver, has an abusive relationship with Dorothy. Pull up the SD card. He's door dashing with Dorothy.
Exactly. Show us how he was driving with Dorothy.
But they're terrified to look at the SD card. They're terrified from the evidence. I mean, they only subpoenaed April 5th. You're charging Mustafa with murder. You're not going to subpoena April 4th, April 3rd, April 2nd. Everything in the SD card to show this is premeditated.
Why not get all of the videos off of this dash cam? Why only retrieve April 5th?
Because it's going to show that Mustafa loves Dorothy. He's not a reckless driver. Instead, they want to rely on kids that they weaponize against Mustafa.
I mean, isn't that what they asked every witness? Did you see any erratic driving behavior? Did you see any erratic? It's like they're pushing for this erratic driving behavior. They want to say he was reckless. They want to say, but the people are saying he was not reckless. He was just driving. He was just going with the flow of
I
traffic.
mean, we can just look at the dash camera and you can see he's not a reckless driver.
Exactly.
Every witness on the scene says it wasn't a reckless. There was no erotic driving in this vehicle. There was nothing wrong. I mean, Every witness says that he was driving normal. It looked like he was passing the car in front of him. Now, including Drum, when he talked to Mustafa on the phone, he tells him
It looked like you were trying to pass a car in front of you. It looked like you were trying to pass a car. You took the left lane. Okay, you overstepped or whatever he said.
the only reason he got away with arresting Mustafa is because he falsified the warrant.
I mean, this is the warrant. I'm reading to you why they were able to come to Mustafa's house, put him in handcuffs, and take him away. Okay, they claim that electronic data recorder downloaded from a search warrant yielded information of the 2007 Chrysler not making any serious attempts to brake or steer out of oncoming traffic. Now, you just heard a witness say she heard brake skids. Okay, we clearly have photos of the road itself with skid marks from Mustafa's tires. We have the dash cam itself.
What do you mean, the investigator
Where
himself?
everything shifts forward prior to getting to the light. Okay, everything shifts forward in the car, indicating Mustafa just slammed the brakes. Okay, you can clearly see in the dash cam, even before it cuts off, that he turned left to avoid all the oncoming cars.
The investigator himself said he avoided all the vehicle, cleared all the vehicle, and the SUV is the one that turned into him.
She must have turned in.
And all these are his brake marks.
You know, I'll say it again. How hard is it? I mean, this is a 2013 Chevy Suburban. It's a GM vehicle. How hard is it to pull up the steering angle on this vehicle? Okay? And just see where the steering angle was. Was it straight? Was it left? Was it right? We know where it was. I mean, we know what Robert Drum said. Based on the damage of the Suburban, she must have turned into him. He clearly cleared the vehicle, the SUV, and she, in a panic, she turned into him. I mean, we know from the data recorder of the SUV that she never hit the brake. Clearly, she never hit the brake. It's based on the data recorder. It says in the data recorder of the SUV, she never hit the brake. The brake pedal was never depressed. She was on the gas, okay? And then milliseconds before impact, she had let off the gas. How hard is it? Again, how hard is it to take a GM vehicle, a 2013, and check the steering angle? You're going to see her steering angle was turned right. I mean, you look at the road itself, okay? You look at the road itself. The road that Mustafa cleared, her lane where he cleared, all the radiator fluid from her vehicle is in the lane over. It's not in the lane that she was traveling in. It's in the lane over. Which clearly shows she turned into him. But here they say that he never made an attempt to brake or steer out of oncoming traffic. That's a clear lie. It's a clear lie. But then again, this is, by the way, this is a sworn affidavit. Okay? What that means is Robert Drum stood before a judge, raised his right hand, and said exactly what's written here. And he lied, flat out lied. He knew he lied because he says that they've already downloaded the data from the electronic data recorder. He already downloaded it. He's
What do you
looking
mean?
at it.
The computer inside the car shows that Mustafa's foot was on the brake the whole entire time.
The photos from the scene were from April 5th. Okay? The dash cam was already reviewed by Robert Drum, clearly showing Mustafa slammed the brake. There was a vehicle to his right. There was nowhere for him to. He saw an opening and he took it and he cleared the vehicle.
In the
And she turned
conversation,
into him.
in the conversation that he has with Mustafa, he's telling him, "It looks like you're passing the car in front of you."
Now again, I'll remind you, this is a sworn statement. It's a sworn affidavit to take someone's freedom away. They took Mustafa's freedom away based on these sworn statements by Robert Drum. Clearly, he committed perjury. Not only that, but he caused an individual harm. Okay? Now, the next statement is, the accused has a reported extensive history of physical abuse to the children and victim. Where the hell do you see any report of abuse? Where? There are no incidents. Zero incidents. When I say incidents, I mean 0 calls. 0 calls for service accusing Mustafa of abuse. I mean, he just met the girl like 2 months ago. Okay?
The whole entire relationship that
for
Mustafa
Robert
has
Drum
with
to lie
Dorothy
about these,
is 3 months. He moved into the apartment with Dorothy 2 months into it.
Exactly. 2 months into it. I mean, these are clearly. I just read you all the lies, and we showed you the evidence. So the real question is, how can a police department, how can a chief of police sleep at night knowing that his officers are committing perjury, tampering with evidence, tampering with witnesses, abusing children, taking away people's freedom? How do you expect your community, how do you expect us to trust the police when we can clearly identify an individual who's been with the police department for 20 years? You know, I'll ask a better question. How long has Robert Drum been lying? How many people has he put in jail based on his little gang of officers that are willing to turn off their body cams, to tamper with witnesses, to tamper with evidence, to conceal evidence, destroy evidence? How many times has he done it before to be so comfortable that they think they've perfected this process? They think they perfected this process, okay? And they think that the Commonwealth Attorney, Amy Ashworth, is going to come in and save the day. She's going to seal off all the body cams. She's going to finish the job. I mean, we see these statements made by police like getting our ducks in a row before we pull the trigger.
Every other body cam, I have investigator Chad Mason and Robert Drum talk about getting their ducks in a row.
Why would an investigator be telling a witness we have to get our ducks in a row before we pull the trigger while he's lying on sworn affidavits?
Make sure your camera is off for all of it. We gotta get our ducks in a row. What are you doing here?
I mean, your job as a investigator, as a police officer, when you're talking to a witness, your job is to extract information. Okay? But to manipulate the information that's incoming, to hear one thing and to write something else down, you know, that's beyond corruption. That's criminal.
Now,
That's why we're here at the Department of Justice. Okay? We're asking the DOJ because clearly Peter Newsham can't do his job. Clearly Amy Ashworth can't do her job. Clearly Glenn Hill cannot do his job. So we're asking the federal government that this is absolute police misconduct. It's beyond police misconduct. Okay? And it seems like it's not a one-time thing. This seems like a systemic thing. It seems like they've perfected this lying process down so good that they've got the Commonwealth Attorney involved in their process.
anytime you have police misconduct,
I mean, if you talk about it,
the battery is running out.
Trespass.
Yeah, if you talk about it, they're going to issue you a trespass and trespass you off the property. On that note, I want to talk about what's going on with Sheriff Glenn Hill and my trespass and my arrest and my trial with Sheriff Glenn Hill before we end this podcast. Now, what's really disturbing is that the sheriff lawyer reached out to my lawyer. Sharon Pandak is the lawyer for Sheriff Glenn Hill, and she tells my lawyer Blake that we want you to tell your client to remove the previous podcast where he is talking about the Judge Jeanette Irby, and we want him to remove that podcast and advise him not to talk about the sheriff. Well, I'll tell you, I find it interesting that you're reaching into my lawyer to talk to me. You can talk to me directly, ma'am. Well, now I know that you are watching my podcast, and I ask you to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. Apparently, you're watching the podcast. The jail is watching the podcast. The Commonwealth Attorney, she says, the Commonwealth Attorney reached out to Judge Jeanette Irby and advised her and told her that in my previous podcast, I talk about her and her inappropriate relationship with the sheriff. Well, ma'am, how could I not come to the conclusion that you're fucking the sheriff? Allegedly. I mean, they want to say, being a paralegal, I guess, it's beautiful when you got to throw in these terms. Apparently, allegedly, the key word is
Alleged.
Alleged. How could you not want me to reach a conclusion that you're allegedly fucking the sheriff when your conduct behind the bench is very questionable? I mean, you're ruling against the evidence. It's black and white. I've got a video of the situation where I'm standing on public property recording a video. The sheriff gets on the stand and he flat out lie about the whole entire situation. His deputies get on the stand and flat out lie about the whole entire situation. I mean, this is a situation where it's on video. It's literally on video. And your deputy and the sheriff himself gets on the stand and they're lying right in front of you. As a matter of fact, my lawyer did an amazing job impeaching the credibility of the sheriff. He takes the recording from General District Court, what the sheriff said in General District Court, and plays the recording for the sheriff after the deposition of the sheriff. And the sheriff are saying two different things. He says one thing in General District Court, he says another thing in Circuit Court, where this lawyer is simply playing the audio of what the sheriff said, and the sheriff is flat out lying about the situation. The deputies that get on the stand are flat out lying about the situation. And the judge,
By the way,
Mohammed, Judge Jeanette Irby sees that this sheriff is flat out lying. She sees the video and she rules against the evidence. I mean, in one of the portions, there is a good faith argument. There's a Supreme case out of the Supreme Court, and in good faith, she's telling my lawyer, we're not gonna tell the jury about the good faith argument, and she's cherry picking what the jury is going to hear on Wednesday. This coming Wednesday, I have a jury trial. She wants to cherry pick what the jury is going to hear. How is that appropriate? I'm supposed to be getting a jury trial, and you have a corrupt judge. She's a retired judge. I don't know where the fuck they got her from. She's a retired judge. The question is, why do I have a retired judge?
why do you have a defective judge?
Why do I have a defective judge that's fucking the sheriff?
Allegedly.
I mean, allegedly. How could you not want me to come to a conclusion where this judge is having an inappropriate relationship with the sheriff? Now, here's what I'm gonna tell you, and this is my message to Sharon Pandak. You're telling my lawyer to tell me, be careful, because we might come after you with a lawsuit. Well, ma'am, I'm coming after you with a lawsuit. I'm coming after your sheriff, and I'm coming after Jeanette Irby with a civil lawsuit. And I cannot wait, because one of the foundation of a civil lawsuit is you have to have standing within the lawsuit. Now, I'm writing up my lawsuit, and I'm going to represent myself pro se. I'm a paralegal. I'm writing the lawsuit, and I'm moving forward. Now, the biggest problem is when you submit this lawsuit, you have to have standing with the court for this civil lawsuit to move forward. Now, guess what, Sharon Pandak? If you file a lawsuit, it's actually going to be better for me, because I can... Because
she knows how that works. She's gonna open the door for you.
Exactly. You're gonna open the door for me, because now I can counter, and I'm gonna have that standing. Because my ultimate goal is to subpoena the sheriff's cell phone communication and Judge Jeanette Irby cell phone communication. I want to know if they're communicating and they're having an inappropriate relationship. And I'll promise you, in those communication, I'm gonna find out that you're actually fucking the sheriff. Allegedly. And wait until this comes out to the community.
Is it not true that when Sheriff Glenhill was on the stand, is it not true that she was answering for him?
I could not believe that my lawyer would ask the Sheriff Glenhill would be on the stand in a deposition, and my lawyer would ask
Blake
him.
Weiner is asking him a question.
Blake Weiner is asking him a question, and the Judge Jeanette is answering for him. I mean, how... To the point that Blake got so frustrated, he's like, Your Honor, I'm asking the sheriff. This is his deposition. I mean, lady,
that's crazy. The First Amendment is the First Amendment, whether you're in Virginia, whether you're in Arizona, California. The First Amendment is the First Amendment wherever you go. It should not be this hard, and your answer should not be changing, Sheriff, every time you take the stand.
You know, I'll
Every
tell
time he
you,
takes a stand,
it's a different answer.
he's got a different answer for the First Amendment.
I mean, he
First
tells.
Amendment is the First Amendment. You know what we're doing here? That's the First Amendment. You have a right to come out and peacefully present your case, talk, do as you please within the law. Okay, but in Glen Hill's part of the country, and Glen Hill, aka Saddam Hussein, whatever he wants to, Kim Jong Un.
I mean, Prince William County.
Whatever he wants to call himself, the supreme leader of the land.
I mean, is this the part where I say, all hail Sheriff Glen Hill?
Apparently
All
that's
hail.
what he wants.
Is this the United States of Sheriff Glen Hill? Apparently in Prince William County, according
He's
to
the
him.
supreme leader of the land.
I'm supposed to tell Sheriff Pendek, oh my God, you emailed my lawyer, all hail Sheriff. Fuck you and your sheriff. And I promise you, by the time I'm done with this sheriff, he's not going to have a badge or a uniform. Hey, on Wednesday, I have a jury trial. And Judge Jeanette Irby, is rigging this game by cherry picking what the jury is going to hear. Well, I'm going to take the stand on Wednesday, and I'm going to tell them I was standing there, and I was recording a video.
You know,
On public property, not disorderly. It's
Look.
goddamn on video. The whole thing is on video. Now here's the thing. Now they cherry pick that, you know, what the jury is gonna hear. I don't know what they're gonna do on Wednesday, but I'll tell you one thing. I'm gonna appeal it, and I promise you, if I don't hold him accountable on Wednesday, I'm gonna appeal it, and I'm gonna take it to a higher court.
You know what I
And I'm
find
filing those lawsuits.
You know
You
what
can count. You can take that to the bank.
let me just tell you one last thing. You know what I find
It's
really
gonna turn off, by the way. The
Yeah,
battery's
you know
on.
what I find really interesting
Yeah.
is that they're forgetting why you're standing there. You're standing there because Amy Ashworth, the Commonwealth attorney, who also happens to have a seat at the jail board of Prince William County Adult Detention Center, the jail, the torture center, okay, and Sheriff Glen Hill. These two individuals are sitting on the jail board where 17 individuals lost their lives at the hands of correctional officers. Individuals are being tortured in America. Pretrial detainees are literally losing their lives, being carried out in body bags because of the corruption of Amy Ashworth and Sheriff Glen Hill. And you stood there to bring attention to the sheriff. Instead of coming out and saying, "Hey, what's the problem? Let's talk about it." Instead, they shut down public meetings. Public meetings are no longer public. If you're standing in front of the courthouse, which is public property, they arrest you. If you go into court to document the corruption, they trespass you.
I mean, you got trespass. You got trespass for what? For simply documenting what they're doing behind closed doors?
Because of this.
You're sitting in court.
A notebook.
You're
and a
sitting in
paper.
court taking notes on the case. And they trespass you.
Why? Because Judge Carol Weimer probably has a inappropriate relationship with one of the
Judge Weimer is fucking the sheriff too. Oh my. Okay, here's the thing. Sheriff,
No, I mean, look, Judge Carol Weimer hired his best friend.
I mean, I know that he has an inappropriate relationship with the prosecutor, not the sheriff. Allegedly.
What is the prosecutor's?
Apparently you gotta say allegedly.
Look.
Well, allegedly, everybody's fucking each other.
Look, what do these prosecutors have on Judge Carol Weimer? On Judge Carol Weimer, that number one, he refuses to recuse himself, and number two, he rules without evidence.
Regardless of the evidence.
Without evidence, against the evidence, he rules based on favoritism. Friendship. Isn't that what
Jeanette Irby? I mean, do you blame me? Like, here's the deal. Do you blame me for thinking that Jeanette Irby is fucking the sheriff? Lady, you're giving me every reason to think that you're fucking the sheriff. Allegedly. Now, my question is, are you fucking the sheriff behind the bench? After the court proceeding? Before the court proceeding? Behind? I mean,
I'm gonna say I don't think the capability exists.
I don't think the guy has... I mean, how could you fuck Jeanette Irby if you don't have... I mean, you know, we're gonna...
the tools.
If you don't have the tools. Now, on that note, we have a jury trial on Wednesday. We have a defective judge that's rigging this system where the jury is not going to hear this judge lied on the stand. But here's the deal. Sheriff Glen Hill, I've got your audio and I've got your voice on the internet. Now you've got a giant machine, a giant apparatus. You've got deputies sealing off and closing and making sure audio doesn't get leaked out. How do you feel that your voice is on the internet? Now, I want to thank specifically the deputies, the sheriff deputies that are working with us behind closed doors, supplying us with audio recordings and video recordings so that this misconduct doesn't continue in our community.
And it reaches the right places.
And it reaches the right places at the Department of Justice. Sheriff Glen Hill says, I have a full-blown investigation. He comes up to my brother and he tells him, I have a full-blown investigation into your brother. I'm going to get to the bottom of which sheriff deputy is working with him and supplying him with recordings. Well, Sheriff, good luck. It's not going to work. I've got your voice on the internet.
Then again, by the way, what you're talking about are public hearings. What are they so afraid of? What are they being so secretive about? These are public hearings.
Well,
you have a right to the Sixth Amendment to have a public trial. But I mean, your trial was in private.
My trial was in a private room with a
Mustafa's trials
defective
are in private.
judge.
My hearing is going to probably be in private on the 27th.
Apparently,
of March.
we're living in Prince William County, the United States of Sheriff Glen Hill. We're supposed to, according to the lawyer of the sheriff, I'm supposed to have a picture of the sheriff in my living room, and every day I'm supposed to say, all hail Sheriff Glen Hill.
The supreme leader of the land.
Supreme leader of the land, Prince William County. Not according to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is going to get to the bottom of it. I've got different individuals in the community that are filing complaints, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. On that note, I want to thank Muhammad for being on this podcast. I want to thank the rest of the family for being here. Thank you for being here. I want to specifically thank Missy, Stefana, Casey, Shelly, Farah, Shirley, and Bustos, and everybody that I forgot to mention their name. I want to thank specifically the witnesses that pretended to be Christine Al-Khuzai. We miss you, ma'am. You've done a lot for this case. Thank you for gathering all the witnesses on the internet and having them talk. I mean, if we didn't have them talk, we wouldn't have cracked this case and got to the bottom that the Commonwealth attorney is using a bunch of crackheads to...
Let's wrap it up.
A bunch of crackheads that say, we were not there, we didn't see anything, and sitting there lying about Mustafa. On that note, thank you for being here.
We're going to thank the officers who are here.
We want to thank the officers that's at the gate for the Department of Justice. We want to thank the police officer that came out here. We want to thank their supervisor for accommodating us here. And on that note, thank you for joining this podcast. This is not another boring podcast. Mustafa, through the police body cam, Judge Carol Weimer, under the microscope.
You didn't thank Sharon Pendek.
Specifically, thank Sharon Pendek. Ma'am, I'm coming after your sheriff with a lawsuit, whether you like it or not, and I'll see you in court.